Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before starting, I would like to thank very much the organizers for giving me the chance to explain to you what we're doing at the Commission and what we're expecting to do and what we're expecting from you a bit. My name is Olazabal. I'm the head of unit of the Agriculture, Forest and Soil unit in the Directorate General of Environment in the European Commission. We are a bit the counterpart in DG Environment of the colleagues in DG Agriculture. So very much our aim in life is to make sure, and it's linked very much to soil protection, that agriculture takes into account environmental considerations. I will not bore you very much with what the problem is, the environmental problem is, because that's what the project was about and you know a lot about it. I just want to mention that there's two components of the problem. There's the environmental component, where we have land is a finite resource, we have a huge land take in Europe. Europe is a very old, very crowded continent, so it's a very fragmented and constructed continent. We've been here for a while and we are many. So we have a huge land take of 1,000 square kilometers of agricultural land every year. We also have a growing share of EU land which is affected by different soil degradation processes. We also have this problem at global level, and the EU is contributing to the global land degradation by also having sustainable consumption patterns which are driving soil degradation elsewhere. And we also relied on a lot of land being there for us to produce, so there's a lot of virtual land imports we are doing in the EU. We need to take that into account. But here, there are hundreds of these worrying maps across the EU on different soil threats where they are occurring, the extent to which they are occurring, and very much thanks to the JRC we have those maps. But basically, I think there's an enormous evidence of the problem being there, the problem being increasing, the problem being a social and economic as well as an environmental problem, and the climate change and the biodiversity loss would exacerbate that problem. And we have, just as Sergio has just said, a problem of also desertification with 12 member states which are considered to be affected under the UNCCD. But there's also a policy development problem. There's a problem of lack of integration of land protection aspects in other policy areas. There's the problem of the fact that we are dealing with many different administrative levels that need to take a decision, and we'll go into that later. We have the problem that land is mostly privately owned in the EU, and that, compared to water or compared to whereas other environmental media, brings about an enormous level of complication. The fact that the owners of land legitimately believe they have a right to decide on what's done on that land, but at the same time that land is also a public good. And it's this constant trying to conjugate the private ownership of the land with the public good characteristic of the land that is constantly a problem at political level. We also have, although we know a lot, we don't know everything. There's a lot of knowledge gaps still there, what needs to be that need to be filled in, not only in terms of how soil and land and soil functions, but also in terms of the degradation across the EU, more precise on-field data, etc. There's a lot of data out there. Sometimes there's a question of access to data. There's sometimes a question of comparability of data. Sometimes a question of lack of data altogether. We have undergone and I can confidently say, a very traumatic experience in the EU with the proposal of the Commission for a Soil Framework Directive. And then I think all that political discussion we've had for 8 years with the Member States and the Parliament and all stakeholders shows how difficult, how intrinsically difficult it is to legislate or to take decisions at whatever level on this topic. It becomes quickly a very emotional topic. It wouldn't look like it, but it does. And what we've seen when we've discussed it with member states or members of parliament, many of them being farmers themselves, it's an extremely emotional topic. It becomes quickly a perception of you or whatever administration mingling on a very private part of the citizens' rights. It also brings in the difficulty of having a policy that could be able to be applied at very different administrative levels. So at the global level, we've seen the UNCCD, at the EU level, at the national level, at the regional level, at the local level, and also at the land user level. So it is extremely difficult to articulate all these levels of policy making and of decision making, and whatever is decided, that it would percolate down in the right way to 5 levels below. At the same time, it's very difficult to have a system that would nevertheless be common to all, but be able to cater for extremely variable situations in the EU, and even within the EU, within regions, and even within regions, within municipalities. So it's the complexity, it's an extremely complex policy area to take decisions on. It needs to involve a lot of people, and a lot of people who sometimes feel threatened that this would take away some rights they have acquired. We've seen these very difficult discussions on the Soil Framework Directive, on which for 8 years the Commission has not managed to unblock a situation. So we continue to have a blocking minority by 5 member states, which I always have fun in naming, being Germany, France, Netherlands, Austria, and the UK. And we haven't managed to break that blocking minority for 8 years. That blocking minority was formed on basis of subsidiarity and also on basis of costs. And the 5 member states that are in that blocking minority are there for different reasons. What is very important is, despite the changes, despite the discussion, despite the fact that there's growing evidence on the cost of land degradation at all levels, despite the bigger pressure from the society to provide public goods, we haven't managed to break that through. For member states who have legislation, the situation is still, they are in the comfortable side that this wouldn't have changed much. But for the 22, 23 member states that wanted this, because they thought this would make it easier at home to adopt legislation on soil, because it's an extremely difficult thing to do and adopt and approve. We've had approved at EU level. They have been left behind without this kind of support from the EU. It's all about trade-off. We have soil functions and we have land functions. We have many. It provides recreational services, settlement, it provides food, fibre and provisioning services, regulating services, host biodiversity. And the problem is there are trade-offs. We will not be able to have all the functions at the same time, at the same level, but we have, the main goal is to thrive, that we have a balanced set of functions, as many functions, and a soil that could one day do a function, but maybe another day we will need another function, would be in sufficiently good state to be able to provide those functions in time. And because those functions are linked to different policy areas, be it transport, be it energy, be it the bioeconomy, now with this rush on the bioeconomy we are seeing, the agricultural policy, forest, climate change, biodiversity, green jobs or jobs in general, transport infrastructure, it is an extremely difficult discussion to be had, because there are many interests pulling each one on one of the soil functions. In terms of policy context, in addition to the Soil Framework Directive proposal, we have the roadmap on resource efficiency, where we wanted very much in the resource efficiency panorama to bring land as a resource, and I will get back more into this. You need to know also that our commissioner, who's a Slovenian, Janis Potočnik, he's an economist himself. He's a statistician actually, but he's an economist by training. And these 5 years he's been in the job, he's been very much into giving an economic touch to all the environmental policy, realizing from the economy perspective that otherwise nobody would listen to us, much less in this economic crisis. He has worked a lot for the valuation of biodiversity and ecosystem services. He has worked a lot on putting land really as a resource, a scarce resource, in mindset, and very much into the resource efficiency, green economy package. Then we have the Rio Plus 20 that Sergio has been explaining on the future we want, and where soil and land degradation have been recognized again as a global problem. It was recognized already, but it has been reformulated in a stronger way. And then we have in 2013 the 7th action program, which is the action program of the EU for the next years. And there again we are calling for targets on land take and also on soil degradation processes. For us, there are two different things. One is the quality of soil, which we would have been legislating had we been left under the Soil Framework Directive, which is very much on the quality of soil and its functions. And then another issue is the land, which is rather a strategic land planning, land use discussion. And we want to separate the two things. Of course they are linked, because the quality of the soil you have would determine what kind of land use you can make. Sometimes the quality of the soil doesn't allow you to have some land uses. On the other hand, the land use you make can have actually consequences on the quality of the soil. But we need to have these two things in mind. And why so? Because the competences of the EU on land use and spatial planning are very limited, very limited. It's an area extremely sensitive for member states and for which any decision requires unanimity. So we're always very careful into never going too much of that area, because we're going to go quickly in troubled waters. At the same time, we realize we have a very irrational land use across the EU, and we are not really using that resource strategically enough. So we need to always play with the fact that this is a political no-go where unanimity is required, but at the same time, from the environmental point of view, the quality of the soil, that's something that we can regulate as an environmental media, and that's what we've been trying to do for a while. One thing that is very important, and I think Sergio and the colleague who will be speaking after me, is to link more closely the soil agenda with other agendas which are there, which are more advanced. The biodiversity agenda is a very clear one. When we talk about economics of land degradation, there's the whole agenda of the valuation of ecosystem services that it's out there and it's more advanced. Soil is an ecosystem just as any other ecosystem, and we should be able to link what we're doing on land degradation economics with all the mapping of ecosystem services and ecosystems that is being done, and with the valuation of ecosystem services. And we need to link it also, once we have a value of the soil and land ecosystem services, to plug it in. And that's because one thing is to have the value, but one thing is the next step, and it's a very difficult one, to plug it in the national accounting systems. So when the member states are doing their accounting systems of their assets they have and the assets they are losing, that the land degradation is plugged in. Otherwise, it's an asset which is being degraded, the cost of which is not anywhere to be found in the national accounting systems. It's a very difficult economic exercise to be done, and we are 20 years from that point, but we need to start somewhere. So this is being done very much for biodiversity. It should, in theory, because soil is an ecosystem, it should be already in this, but having worked 4 years in the biodiversity unit myself, I see that soil is nowhere to be found. It's always terrestrial ecosystems and above ground biodiversity that's looked upon. We need to plug in there. The same goes for restoration of degraded land. We have in the biodiversity strategy a target that by 2020 we need to restore 15% of degraded ecosystems. This comes from an Aichi target under the CBD, but basically there we could also bring our land degradation restoration part into that. There's the issue of land degradation neutrality, which mirrors a bit what is being done under the biodiversity on the non-net loss initiatives. Now I will just briefly go about that, and I will just speed up. On resource mobilization, we have the same problem. Be it biodiversity, be it land degradation, be it's where the money comes. The public funding is under enormous pressure now. So we need to also look at innovative financing mechanisms and innovative financing instruments and incentives. And then there's a whole agenda there where we can also cooperate and I think in all these areas, they're still pioneering areas, both for biodiversity and certainly for land, where the research community could bring in an enormous added value. So what's next? The follow-up of the 7th EAP, where the targets are there. There's also a mention that there needs to be a legislative proposal for soil at EU level. So on that, the Commission, as announced, is considering whether we should withdraw the Commission proposal for soil framework directive, and then to see whether we should come up with an alternative initiative, realizing the paralysis, the political paralysis we've been for the last 8 years. Then the preparation of the communication on land as a resource, which will be for 2015. Of course, we need to say that we will get a new commission, and ergo a new commissioner at the end of the year. We need to see if he or she will have the appetite for opening the front of the land use in the policy area. But I mean, everything is there for that person to realize that the moment and the momentum, the political momentum is there, but there's an issue of courage also. We will have the non-net loss initiative, but that's the colleagues from the biodiversity who also will be coming with the non-net loss initiative in 2015, and we are linking very much the land as a resource with the non-net loss initiative ourselves internally. There's the International Year of Soils in 2015, so a bunch of things will happen. There's also the Expo, the Universal Exposition of Milan, where the topic is Feeding the World and Energy for Life, I think it's the title, very much focused on food security, land degradation, etc. We'll be doing a lot of things there, and I'm sure many of you too. Then the recommendations by the Intergovernmental Working Group under the UNCCD, which is an enormous valuable work going on there. And we will see what happens with the SDGs, the achievement of the SDGs. Very quickly on the land communication, we are still at the exploring mode. We still need to get a commissioner who would like to probably shape also the land as a resource. But what is our main goal is to first put into the mind of the politicians that land is a scarce resource. We cannot waste it as we do. We cannot take stupid decisions as we do, and we see that at all administrative levels. It needs to start ensuring that we have enormous competing demands on land, and that there are trades-off. And then also, so that's to put the radar, the political radar, and also what can we do at EU level, knowing this problem of competences and knowing also that land use decisions are taken at a very, 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 very local level in most of the member states. So this is very briefly wanted to give you a kind of flavor, and thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to have questions later. Thank you.